And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Antonia Lau, world-class professional psychic, major earth changes expert, metaphysical teacher, and a woman who has also experienced alien first contact with 5 different species. Antonia, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It's really wonderful to be here on your show.
Was your psychic ability something that's been with you your entire life, or did you have some type of event that opened you up?
Actually, I was born this way, but I was born into an academic-based family, Jeff, that didn't discuss or talk about this. But we were brilliant in school, so I'd had my library card since 7, and at 9, I realized, wait a minute, they're not going to talk about this. This is real. My mom's mouth would just drop when I would repeat something, then it would happen. And so I went to the adult section from 9 on and pulled every book I could get on esoteric sciences, metaphysical, spiritual studies, parapsychology, and everything I could get my hands on. And it hasn't stopped. To this day, I think there's 17 books by the nightstand. So I continue that growth and guidance from the divine. But I knew that God would not give a child this kind of a gift if it wasn't for the good of others. And it had to be learned, Jeff, from the right sources, never the wrong. So I've studied in the highest lighted path. So I've been ordained as a minister, shaman, but still I didn't expect that by the courses or classes I took. And I can't stop the studies, but they're also guided in the highest way, which I prefer. So I've had over 50,000 readings in my life. I stopped counting at 2003 with clients all over the world. They would call me celebrity psychic, psychic to the stars, and I'd get 20 calls a day for reading appointments, and half of those would be from other psychics wanting their readings. But it wasn't just, I treat everybody the same. I don't see your, checkbook balance or your mansion any difference. I have to get to the soul. But on top of that, that hard and fast skepticism, you won't hear me say or espouse anything out of my mouth unless it's been confirmed for about 5 years by the divine guides. I can, study, learn, get all the certifications, big deal. I want proof. So I make them prove it to me. And so literally, I keep it quiet until after they beat me in the head 50 million times before I'll open my mouth. So they have been always around and with me. And my studies into meditation and deep practice and study continues to this very day. But their guidance has been spot on, especially about world events as well as the people's lives I don't even know. So I trust them explicitly. They do know much more than we do.
I noticed that you keep saying they. Who
Yes.
are they?
They, I was introduced to, are the high guides I refer to. And each soul, each person, once they ask permission to come to Earth School 101, which is what this is they are granted the choice of a guide/guardian angel because they do know everything. We just think we do with the 2% of the brain that we tend to use as humans. We're sweet, but a little slow. But that guide is always on the right side of us. And they don't have to come back to Earth School 101. They've completed it in their last life. They've excelled. And so they have a similar life path as the one you've chosen for yourself. So they know how to get you through there in the highest ways. But the number one quality, Jeff, that guide/guardian angel know or loves you better than anyone on the planet because they know what love really is. That's the big difference. They don't judge. God in the universe doesn't judge only stupid humans. But what happens is they know and are hoping we ask for input when our 2% of the brain doesn't know where we should head or what we should do. So, but I have been listening to them on whether it's personal events as well as for the world throughout my entire life. And I found them with my high skepticism to be spot on. So it's been an amazing journey. For instance, in the mid 90s, clients would come from all over, and only those that would ask about, what about 2000? Is the world going to end? Remember that? Y2K and all that. What should I do? They were so worried. And the guides would tell me, and I can't edit, I have to say, they say, you will see the earth changes begin no later than January 2005. And so what happened 5 days before December 26, 2004? Sumatra tsunami. So that was, they were telling me to tell clients that in 96, 98. And so they were spot on within 5 days. And the tsunami, wiped out 10 coastlines and 250 lives in 10 to 15 minutes. Scientists noted after that, Jeff, that the whole island of Sumatra had moved a whole mile. And they were spot on. But they had told me in reference to this many, many years before and about the earth changes, Jeff. And I tried to disprove it. I thought, this is a myth. This is garbage because of my heavy skepticism for everything, which is a good thing. And there's a lot of garbage out there in the world, right? Misinformation. And we don't grow or evolve with a lot of misinformation as for humankind. But I kept studying about the earth changes for about 5 years, geologically, geographically, how can I say it, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, as well as all the scientific levels. And then I found out it's real. And that's when I started to tell people in the late 70s, even though I'm 27, but the late 70s, I really don't care about aging. But what happened is they looked at me like, oh, you're so strange. And what do we have in Mount St. Helens in 1980 May? It wiped out everything within 5 miles. And so people have to understand this is not a negative. It is the process of growth and life and evolution. That's all. So the guides have given me information in detail about those changes, but it started from all the readings and all the studies from the metaphysical qualities that I was supposed to, how can I say it, give to the world. So I teach classes. I've been teaching since I was 20, these classes on the real esoteric sciences, the way they were intended in the highest ways, as well as starting the readings. But it is amazing what they've given me directly. And so I just sit back and watch, and scientists slowly discover what the guides have given me decades ago and continue. It continues to come to pass.
Are you clairaudient and they just kind of whisper in your ear?
Actually, I'm all the clairs: clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, clairgustient, the whole list of clairs, I call them. And but it's that inner knowing, but I know it's them, but I actually hear their voices or sometimes a group of voices in the highest ways. But it's amazing. They are spot on, and not to create fear, to create proactive understanding and awareness as we move forward for generations to come through these changes and events.
Do the guides only come when you summon them, or are they whispering to you all the time?
It's a constant. And so what I've done to prepare is to stay, I have what I call my God time, 2 hours of prep at night before I go to sleep, whatever time that is, and 1 hour meditation. And I reverse it in the morning, 1 hour meditation, and then two, how can I say it, the God time to listen and hear. So I stay plugged in throughout the day. So while I'm working, they'll give me information about the world or clients or whatever. And I thought, don't I get any free time? But it's service, it's divine service. And I've learned I cannot edit, and they say it in a way that's palatable. They're here to make sure we have that knowledge and we have free will to apply that information or not. So some people resonate, some do not, and that's their free will choice.
Are they mostly revealing to you earth changes information or other things?
All things. I couldn't tell. It's the most amazing things. That's why I stay constantly plugged in, because they will reveal all kinds of things. So I teach 2 classes a week online just to kind of reiterate what they've shown in the real reality of the world, so people can again get a calm understanding. You can't be on the fringe. You have to stay in the calm eye of the storm to observe and not absorb, and then move forward in your soul growth, which is the purpose of the whole life.
What other events were you told previously that have turned out to be true?
The Mount St. Helens, the Sumatra. Let's see. They showed. Oh, okay. You're gonna like this one. They showed me one night about the actual shifting of the poles, and they actually show me in a detailed dream. The last dream you have in the morning is usually called the waking dream. It's not symbolic at all. It's very lucid, very detailed, and they want you to remember upon waking. And so I was given this dream, and they showed me a globe of the world. And they showed me it tilting toward the right from North America toward the right. And then they completely showed me a sign that was on the road that said Cape Town. And I thought, what is this? You know, the road sign on the side of a road is Cape Town. It's on a couple of posts. And I looked around, it was Cape Town, South Africa. there was nothing but snow and ice. I couldn't see trees, no earth, no ground, no buildings, no people. And I thought, this is interesting. And I looked around, and all of a sudden, I could hear the crunch of boots. And I saw someone in the distance walking with a couple of 3 or 4 black flak jackets on, like the military has, and black boots, but they were open at the top, flapped open, not tied shut or belted shut or snapped shut. And as they walked, they got closer and closer to the road sign that was there. And you're not going to believe it. What was there was the boot was above, the top of the boot was above that road sign. And there was no one else around. Then they showed me the actual change in the turn. And that was years ago. And I tried at that time, I was trying to learn how to put video in place. And ultimately, what ended up happening was I had many people, emails from all over, especially South Africa, and they were telling me that they started to see changes there. I have clients that are still there now, and they've been sending me pictures for years. Literally, last October, we had the giraffes and lions coming through the snow in South Africa, which is south of the equatorial line. And so they've sent me before that pictures of the frozen passes that never happened. And I guess last October, I guess it was 2024, they were stopped, or 2025 maybe, they were stopped on the road for 48 hours. No traffic could move. It was frozen over. Everybody stayed in their cars on the highway, full of snow and ice. So I trust what they've given me all this time about the world and the events. And it was so we could properly prepare. And wasn't Noah given that information? And everybody laughed at him too. So now they see traces in historical records that, confirm what he was being shown.
Well, it appears that the North Pole is drifting southward. I think it's into Mongolia or Siberia.
Right. And so they're not countering what happens with the other planetary systems. See, unfortunately, they believe the pole shift is just Earth centric. It's not. It's solar systemic centric. The entire solar system is going through major changes, and it's a normal, natural cycle of great Earth changes as well as solar system changes that happen in a cyclic basis outside our known modern history. Therein lies the problem. But I studied and checked, and I keep on checking, and I found that all the other planets now have expanded earthquake activity and volcanic activity and unusual weather patterns than they've ever had before. All of them have tilted the exact same degree as our North Pole, and all of them have had a temperature rise of the exact same increase in our whole solar system. So it's not just Earth-centric. The entire system goes through this. And so when she changes on her shift, you may have heard about it being a binary star with the Nemesis Nibiru system. Planet X, it was discovered in 1950. Farada's work on that and many others continue to work on this, and the cyclic nature. And they, how can I say it, found that this other binary system always comes around. Well, the Planet X or Nibiru, they knew, and it was in Popular Science magazine in 1950. It said it would be around in 50 years. What has been? People don't recognize that when they see these unusual reds in the sky, or what they thought was two suns, is actually the case, not a sun dog, but two actual suns. The red that they see in the, the aurora borealis, they're seen as far south as Florida now, and literally that reddish color is that planet Nibiru, that's iron oxide that leaches off of it. So people don't get it, and it's 6 to 7 times the size of Earth. So what normally happens, I'll give you an example here. Let's say this is Nibiru. Can you see here? And this is the Earth. You see the size differential?
Right.
And so what will end up happening is Nibiru, and it goes back and forth, and it will come around our South Pole, but because our gravitational pull has been weakening for the last 10 to 15, especially the last 5 years, it'll shift it. So while it's going toward Siberia, I did, when that dream happened, I went and got the latitude and longitude opposite for where Cape Town, which would be the new South Pole, would be. And that would be landing Hawaii in the Hawaiian Islands, the archipelago there, in the new Arctic Circle that they showed me. And then I had already studied and known that the scientists had noted that the Hawaiian Islands were once in the Antarctic Circle 13,500 years ago. So it's a natural, normal cycle of change. Edgar Casey, the America's most documented seer, and wrote all this, gave us all this information in deep trance state. He stated the Earth turns 360 degrees, yes, she's round, on her axis every 100 to 125,000 years, but she does it in quarter turns. This is a new quarter turn. So once she gets that assist, it won't be landing in Russia or Siberia. So everything on the western shore of North America will end up in that new Arctic Circle. And so I can just kind of share here, if you can see, I have larger ones, but that I've tried to note the new equatorial line. And she does it. She changes always on her axes, and she's done it for 4.5 billion years of her time here on the Earth. My apologies there. But I can show you here with North America, a little more prominent. But they showed me to the right, and they showed me Cape Town, and they showed me Antarctica moving. And so I was telling people about this way back in 2000, and they used to just laugh. And then scientists noticed that the ice was melting from Antarctica. And they found that there's a 600 million square mile tropical rainforest under Antarctica. Because we learn in what is it, eighth grade science or seventh grade, we learn that when the magnetic poles shift, it forms ice immediately. And that would happen while there's green foliage underneath Antarctica in those places, literally because it's fast frozen. If it was a slow freeze creeping in, it would be brown underneath the foliage, but it's green. And now we're finding structures, and that's why they, how can I say it, wanted to make sure. But we change all these qualities. Why is Greenland called Greenland and it's covered with ice and snow? Because it used to be at a time before green. Why is Iceland called Iceland? And they have all those thermal radiance going on there. Because as it moves gradually, and then when it hits its tipping point, it locks it into the new location. So like I said, after I studied, I started to watch. But I started, as soon as I got my first computer in 99, I started going on and watch the volcanic systems. And scientists had noted for thousands of years, Jeff, that volcanoes would literally, we could expect 20 to 25 a year erupting, never more than one at a time throughout any given year. All of a sudden, I watched it. I kept notes and kept checking on it often. It jumped from 20, 25 a year to 60, exponentially a jump, then to 90, another exponential jump, then to 100, 120, 160, 190. And I thought, people aren't paying attention. They used to tell us about these things, but no, they stopped. And with several volcanoes erupting at once. I was asked to do a talk, the annual Edgar Casey Winter Retreat in Niagara Falls in 2020. And I always try to check my records prior to and make them very accurate beforehand, before a group of 250 some people. And they, obviously, Casey talks about this in the way it's meant, it's the soul growth that's happening from it. And sure enough, there were over 1,500 volcanoes at that time currently active. I did another talk in a couple of years after that, and there were over 2,300 volcanoes currently active. Now they've changed the wording to unrest. But these are dormant volcanoes, and a ton have popped up underneath our oceans as well as our coastlines in other parts of the world. So, but they do not want the population to know because it would create panic or chaos. My point is, if you educate, we can prepare.
Do you have a timeline for when we're going to reach a critical point where things are really going to go south?
Yes. Everywhere on the planet will be impacted as it always will. And given from what the events are showing at this point, we have the next 2 to 4 years. Everybody, just because they want to feel better, keeps talking about, 50 years from now, this. No, the process is already ongoing. So when it shifts into its brand new, we have to be in those safe, sustainable locations where we're guided to. And that is so we can literally, spiritually, hold the light between Earth and humankind. The Earth is raising in her vibratory rate. The entire planets in the solar system are as well, and so are humans. Those cosmic rays from our solar system, as well as from the sun, aren't just bouncing onto the planet. They go through us as well. And so ultimately, we are transforming as humankind is.
I'm not really clear on where everything's going to end up. And since I live in North America, even
Yes.
in Texas, where am I going to be when this all goes down?
Okay, so what happens is the warning is, in case it was very accurate, I've watched his is the closest map to the and Gordon Michael Scallion's map, future map of the world, is the closest to Casey's predictions. Everybody else was off, and even the military map that they've had since World War II is off. But you're supposed to be guided where your heart's supposed to be. But the first fracture, Casey states and confirms, will be the West Coast, especially what is known as Southern California. He said, but they'll be given a warning. When Mount Vesuvius starts to flow with lava, not just trembling and shaking and smoking, it gives those on the West Coast up to 90 days to leave the West Coast for that first fracture. And then we have the second fracture where all the Great Lakes will start to empty all the way down through Louisiana. And he states that the Mississippi we will find is something like 50 miles wide. This has happened before. It is a normal, natural change. He states in capitals, it will happen. So what ends up having to happen is we have to understand we asked. We were born and we asked to come at this time, knowing that these changes were going to be here to complete our soul growth and leave the world better than we came. And there are those that are holding that light between earth and humankind. So it's extremely important that we understand how that's supposed to work. So it's a shame that people don't recognize or realize that just because things are going on, that they'll go to a point of fear. It's not about doom and gloom. It's about proper preparation. Because, Jeff, you, myself, and everybody here, we are descendants of survivors.
How should we prepare for this?
All right, we have to prepare spiritually, mentally, and most of all, physically, if this is your free will choice. What has to happen is we realize that we go through change. If you remember your clothing at 3 years old, you couldn't fit into that right now, could you? Yeah. So you were allowed to grow, and so is Mother Earth and all the planets in our solar system. So that's all she's doing is growing. And we have had several generations through the 4.5 billion year history of Earth that have been through this before. And that's why you see them finding underneath the waters mosaics and places and lands, the Bimini Road, everything, because it has happened prior to. And they were great civilizations, some greater than our own. So how we prepare, we anything on surface will not really hold. If you notice, world governments have prepared. Like I said, groups of people have prepared. They have their bunker systems because they know once she goes through these changes, that's so intense, that shift into that new point. All those systems around for weather, we've seen happen. Those changes already. The jet streams changed 2008. They broke apart from one north and one south. There's two doing what they want up north and two doing what they want up south, and that controls all the weather currents and water and currents. But the tectonic plate systems into themselves bumping into each other, we have to recognize even the Pacific tectonic plate is not part of the North American plate. So that's why the Western fracture, it bumped into it. So the best way to prepare is to make sure that we are in a safe, sustainable community, not a single place or location. You have to be with others, at least 100, no less, to 150 of like-minded individuals. But they also must have a spiritual base. I don't care what the spiritual base might be, what everybody's free will would like, but it must have a spiritual component. We are spiritual, physical, and mental here on the planet, not just physical. So while we're in this banana peel, that soul that we are, that lives forever, we promise to hold that light as we grow spiritually aware in those communities safely because of the weather currents, the amount of, like I said, the earth, the torpidity happening, as well as all the problems with all the volcanic ash and all that around the planet. That's going to be here for a while, making an intense change on the surface. Plus, the winds will be moving at least 750 miles per hour once she changes on her axis again. And that, like I said, people have to understand they keep building on surface, some of them, and that won't last. In fact, rectilinear architecture won't last. But all the grid systems will be down. All the systems, you have to go back to hand tools. What did your great grandfather have? He had a hand drill. You know what I'm saying? Everything you have to learn those skill sets You have to teach while you're in those communities, all those skill sets and share and have a sense of normalcy while you're there. So it's important, not on top of a mountain. What do you see the governments around the world do? They go down and in the mountain, down below. So we have to be smart about it with a group of people that are like-minded is going to be key. We saw when they did the biosphere, those people in a year, they just hired them based on their CVs and their, academics, and they didn't talk to each other after the first 3 months they were there. They split apart and stayed on one side and stayed on the other. We don't need that in community. And so we need to be cohesive in a spiritual manner to, how can I say, think and have compassion for one another, as well as a sense of normalcy at that same time.
It sounds like to me that if you don't have a bunker, you're not going to make it.
And they're not going to make it in those little tiny bunkers that are containers or whatever. What would you do if your family was in the guest bathroom, the entire family, for a week? You kill each other, okay? So you have to understand that small stuff is not going to work. So I was actually guided to the right structures as well. So I have a company that forms this so we could put up one modular unit so we can put up a whole community of 4 people, unskilled, over a weekend. And you can cover whatever you need to do and you need to keep it close to those that are there, because when all this breaks out, everybody from the city will line up. If you told your neighbor, they're going to tell their neighbor, and then somebody else, you'll have 500 cars lined up to take what you've got. You can't do that. That'll just break all your infrastructure. So after, 4 days without food and water, people become a little different. So we have to be there prior to, by watching those signs that we can see. And no panic, no fear. Fear blocks the guided, needed intuition that we're going to be needing at that time, and the sense of calm. And I don't care if they're Mormon or the Kabbalist, or I don't care what faith they are, as long as they practice while they're there, because that was the component that was been missing from the earth for quite some time. So this is what we're changing.
You said that the wind will be blowing 750 miles an hour, and I'm assuming other things will
Yeah.
be happening on the surface. How long would a person
Yes.
need to be in the bunker for?
At least 4, and the governments around the world have prepared for 6 years. That was confirmed.
Wow.
They have facilities for 20,000 people, everything ready to go for 6 years. So we have to do it at least 4 because of the turmoil on the upper side. And those that didn't prepare will be lost. You see, through these events in my studies, I found in my research that the earth always goes through these cycles, and she calls just about 2 billion people down to that number each time. And wherever they're pocketed or wherever their safety, they have to deal with those ordeals. I want them to do it as smoothly as possible. So they actually gave me what the communities have to have, hold, everything. And so I was guided and followed that guidance. The trick is, prayers are wonderful. They can save people if they have the meditation with the same intention, Casey says. They can save a city, 10 people with the same intention. 25 can save a nation with the same intention. But get them on the same intention, that's rare. So the people will pray and meditate, but they have to take the action from that meditation. Prayer is when we beg God, thank God, or complain to God. But meditation is when we listen. Remember the words, be still and know that I am, in their own way. So it's important that we build that one-on-one relationship. And I'm not speaking religiously. Man invented 35,000 of those, and it's 12.5 million year history of mankind. Your own one-on-one personal connection to divine creator, God, source, all there is, has to take place. Nobody has to know, but just have that as a focus. So you can hear, see where water is, where safety is.
Is there going to be any place on the planet where you can be above ground and still survive?
No. Every area will be impacted. The least impacted are 2 places. What will end up being southern Canada and what will be Australia. That'll get larger. But for that change or that transition, you have to be underground. And unfortunately, I've seen so many people waste monies above surface. And I'm thinking, well, you didn't think this through, or the wrong locations. So ultimately, my hope is that they will, if they're guided to the work, they can go on my website and take a look, and then they can follow through. If people listen, I'm open to do Q&As after they look through all those. But it's important because the information and data is there. But they have this belief that, well, I can conquer anything. Well, not actually. And so you have to look ahead to all the great civilizations just before us.
I don't think 2 billion people are going to make it because I don't think there's enough bunkers underground for even that number.
What happens is I watch those bunker numbers climb like crazy from 2008 to 10 to 12, went crazy across the US, and they're going crazy again, not for nuclear war. They're going for those other reasons. And so ultimately, I met people that have 2 and 3 of them in different locations. So it's important that it calls just under 2 billion each time. And then unfortunately, a quarter of those, because they didn't prepare properly, will be gone in those first 4 years. That's what I don't want to have happen.
That is a lot of food that you've got to have stored up.
Right, but we have a way that I was shown to grow it 3 times as fast and underground by tricking the photosynthesis. So we implement that, and you can grow everything underground. But you can start off with canned food and water. The most important thing you're going to need is water. That we can't live without water. We can live without food for 2 weeks. But what you would do is you'd start with at least 3 cans of food per person in your community to start with and start your growth. And the way that I had learned, you can actually have from seed celery in 18 days, ripe tomatoes in 28 days. So there are ways to do so naturally and have it nutritious, how can I say it, food that's energetically, ready for you, and you continue to grow. But you have to have a normalcy basis there too. People will be sharing, training, having talent shows, movie nights. A sense of community has to be there. Otherwise, and it has to look aesthetically pleasing. Can't be a cave. People go crazy in a cave as well. You have to make sure the normalcy there. You have to obey the circadian rhythm with timers, things like that. So Christmas tree timers can do that. So there's all kinds of ways. Full spectrum lighting should be introduced, literally. So, and no cool white LED. We can use warm light, but the full spectrum lighting, I've been buying and replacing everywhere I've lived, everywhere I go. So that gives that full spectrum so they can keep that continuation of the circadian rhythm so they can stay mentally focused in the proper ways as well.
Do you think that the ETs will help us in any way?
That's exactly what's happening now and after. And this is what's excellent. There are 97% of our ET brothers and sisters that God creator source has created are benevolent and more highly advanced than us. Casey says that our civilization of Arcturus is the highest spiritual civilization in our multiverse. And then that benevolent souls come from Arcturus and Sirius, the planet Sirius, and they offer that opportunity for our, how can I say it, help spiritually, mentally, and physically. And some of them will even incarnate prior to the event to get people ready, and then after to get them back on track. And so what ends up happening is they're not to interfere because we're supposed to learn to strengthen through these and by helping one another, how can I say it, through this, but they can be heard, as I hear, from the highest point. So they love us more than we love ourselves, if you can notice. And so we have to do so. Casey said in the Atlantean times, the last 3 cataclysms, the last one was 10,600 BC. One prior to that was 28,000 BC. One prior to that was 50,700 BC. He said the civilizations were different between them. The cultures were different that many years between, but they had promised God each time to spiritualize the planet, and they failed. He saw ahead that this time we do so. And by that, I mean, he said that the tenets that will come to fore will be compassion for others, actually, first, brotherhood. Number one, we're all one kind, one human race, brotherhood to others around the world, then compassion and relief to others. Those will be the main themes after these events. So we'll help everybody get back on track.
So when Mount Vesuvius erupts, is that the beginning?
Well, that's part of it. It's already been beginning. And this, he said, the process is gradual. You see, like you talked about, the North Pole wander and things like that, geographic north, as well as the magnetic north is changing. But you'll also see these changes happen in other ways. So when lava flows from Mount Vesuvius is the key. Or he says Mont Pelée, when Martinique will get going, and it has in the last couple of years started. He said, or the Canaries get going. So those are indicators for us to not get fearful, to get in there and get to work, be proactive as possible. But everything you will need, especially hand tools, is indicated. You're not going to be able to access. You may have you build in redundancy with your ability for generation of how you do your power and lights and all that. And there are tons of technologies today that can do that. I went through a swath of them for many years now, and there's more coming. But to generate electricity, whether it's somebody riding on a bike and generating electricity to a battery and saving that energy, oh, that's the low tech to the higher tech. There are tons of ways to do so. If the world governments are doing it, don't you think we should? People should think.
Are all of the world governments in on this information?
Yes, they are. And they, again, don't want to lose control of the population through fear and chaos. So that's what is the case. And so I watched all this, all these years from the guides showing and telling me this. And I remember I went down to the beach, Pacific, coast, and all of a sudden they had started putting up signs that said, this is the tsunami zone after the 94 earthquake. And I was there during that earthquake as well. And so we saw the intensity. It looked like a war zone for a year after that happened. And I noticed something. We couldn't go to the grocery stores, gas pumps, and all that. And I noticed people would gather in parks or green spaces and help each other with barbecue, hot dogs, or whatever, because there was no way. Banks didn't work, ATMs didn't work. You couldn't do anything. And you couldn't, the freeways, remember, we had huge chunks of major freeways that came down. So you couldn't go, you couldn't travel. So I noticed there's a movie called Starman with Jeff Bridges' old movie. And that is an ET. He noticed something. He said, humans are at their best when things are at their worst. And that's what you saw happening at that time. So it's important because we don't realize some people don't even know their neighbors. Well, they need to. And somebody, again, find like-minded groups and organizations that do this in the way that Noah found. Remember, he was called all kinds of names, but he did exactly what the divine said, and it worked out. Now they see proof of that. But it's important because they are always the benevolent ETs love us. Do you understand? And that's the key. We humans are a little devoid in that factor. People tend to love their pets more than they do other humans. We're supposed to learn from those pets to treat humans just as well. I know it's harder with humans. We're supposed to learn that loyalty and love unconditionally. And that's what has to develop in humankind. And this is just one way, but the earth has been through this. All the historic facts and data show she's been through this several times, nothing new. So if your great, great, great ancestors can do it, couldn't you? My whole point.
Is it possible that some ETs will come down in motherships and pick up a bunch of humans and bring them to safety?
That's correct. What ends up happening is not just safety, it's training to put back before the changes happen. On that note about the ETs, I didn't tell anybody. Rarely do I share this, but I had had a dream that happened 4 times, lucid dream. And I remember I was in this group of people and we were on an Earthship, huge, and we were being trained and taught. And I was referred to at that time. I wouldn't tell anybody because I didn't want them to think I was crazy. But a repeated dream 4 times, I'm in the event. And all of a sudden, I go to a guy, Bob Boursier, who was a famous psychic from years ago. Very sweet man, he and his wife in their 80s. And I sat down. And he said, you've been having dreams. He knew exactly. He said, they're going to take you many off planet to train, to put back, to know exactly what to do during this time frame. So the benevolent ones tend to come in your dream state. But I've had both contacts. So the ones, how can I say, that I wasn't so crazy about, but there are brothers and sisters too. It was interesting because it was a time period around 2007 or so. And I had a dear friend, and I had been studying about, what they do with hybridization, how they'll take families and genetics and all that from each generation. And the rule was that if the person in that generation doesn't want to do it, if they're frightened, they were supposed to stop. Well, they're too far in their advance. Some of those races have rid the emotions, and humans have a lot of emotions. So they're trying to breathe the right quality back in. And so what ended up happening was this friend said, Antonia, when I wake up as a little boy, I used to be frozen. I couldn't move my bed, and I would see this green light come or blue light come through the window, and this little creature would come, and I couldn't scream for my mom. He finally got the courage after several times for that happening, and his mom said, that's been happening to me too. They didn't know about this research. And then the grand came and she said, this has been happening to her all her life. Well, after him telling me this, I remember, how can I say it? I came home one day and I parked in the carport in Valencia. And ultimately, what ended up happening was I could see clouds above my unit. It was only 4 units. I'm on the corner, and no other clouds. California has one cloud floating in the sky, but there were no other clouds, and this was kind of square. And I walked into the house and looked up on the patio, and it was above. I thought, what the heck? Well, later that night, I had to work for a client doing the research about his life and what was best in past lives, what his life purpose was. And I'm working on that as a tedious work. Takes 3 days to do and compile on audio for them so they can give their life their best life. And I finished it and I went to punch the computer. And all of a sudden, a huge blue light had come straight in front of me, about a foot, about this wide, over to the lamp. And that, that sound that is on Star Trek, the sound of the doors.
Yeah.
I heard that on my left ear. And I thought, wait a minute. And I looked. And right there, I kept looking. I've been able to see fourth and fifth dimensionally since I was younger. There was a creature and it did this. It pulled up leg and arm, and it was frightened because it didn't know humans could see. And I looked, and I could see what it looked like. The skin, the texture, it was muscled and maybe about 5'6" or so. But it was frightened because I looked. Thought, I'll be darned. But my friend had just called and said they had had an event with that blue light just a couple of days before. And I said, was it a street light? Was it this? Was it that? Trying to, but it wasn't. And that was a couple of days after. And I thought, I'll be darned. So I tried to look up what that one looked like online if somebody had drawn a picture, and they had. And I sent it to a friend of mine that was an FBI profiler. He passed away last December, but I've known him, he and his wife, all those years. And he said, Antonia, I was wondering when they were going to get to you. Well, I want the knowledge. I don't care about riding on the ship. I want knowledge to give to humankind. And after that event, I described it to one of the investigators on another show, and they said, they're going to be back. I thought, yeah, probably. And then I discussed, I had on my show at the time, Barbara Lamb, and she said, they have hive mentality, Antonia. Because then I had another dream in the middle of the night, and it was kind of intense. And all of a sudden, I started to smell smoke while I'm sleeping. I thought, Antonia, if you're sleeping, smell like smoke, you need to get up and check the house. Well, since childhood, I had walked around in the dark so I could heighten my senses to see and sense and not bump into things. So I went down to check the whole house downstairs, nothing. And then something pulled me to the window, and I had shears above it. Summertime, the window was blowing open still. And there was a huge creature, huge, big, like thick, like 8 feet. And I looked engaged because I was on a lake, a man-made lake, and I looked across, and his head was above the windows, but he was standing under the light with a device, trying to look and search. I thought, oh my God, they're looking for me. They know. And so I'm looking, and he was getting upset. And I said, look, God, I promise to help people on the planet here, but I'm all of a sudden he did a roar, and it echoed off the lake onto all the units. And I thought, okay, that's enough. But I watched it for 45 minutes. And I jumped into bed. I said, look, I'm going to sleep. Okay. And so it happened again. And about 5 times I had these different ones. And so this same friend that had that family generational experience, he came to my home and he was helping with something. We were both going to attend a wedding the next day, and he was staying as a guest. And he said, I got to sense something is here, Antonia. Well, he gets really nervous. I didn't want to say, but I had sensed it as well. And I had the patio, it was like a triple patio door, and I had the windows open for air at night, but the drapes closed. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to him on the other side of the room, and I see this beautiful entity, tall, white, with a very pointy chin and a like a bandolier around his chest that meant something, all white and bony elbow. I call them elbows. They look like elbows, but at his shoulders. He was right behind my friend, but I could tell he was friendly. And I didn't say anything. He said, Antonia, you saw something. I said, no, I didn't. He said, yes, you were just, I know. And I said, okay. And he said, I'm never staying at your house again. But the point was, that didn't stop. Unfortunately, I was in next, I think around a couple of weeks later, I was looking to do another report. It was at midnight. I had the drapes closed, but the air coming in beautifully in the summer. And all of a sudden, I could feel an entity to the right of me, right by my ear, within 2 inches. And I could feel its huge, monstrous size as well. And it went right in my ear. I'm trying to work and the computer wouldn't work. I couldn't get the thing done. And sure enough, it went, ugh. And I said, darn it, I don't have time for this. If you were helping your people, we wouldn't be in this mess. I'm helping mine. You do what you need to do. I don't have time for this. And all of a sudden it started to work and it went away. And I thought, oh, you didn't get scared. The computer worked. I thought, oh. And then I looked up that creature and again talked to the FBI guy and said, Antonia, they have beehive mentality. They know you can see. And so they tried to scare you, and you're supposed to not be frightened. Some of them live off the luge, the negative ones live off that fear and that vibration. And it was my natural reaction. Who do you think I don't have time for this. I remember saying, so it was interesting. I thought, okay. And I always would call him and tell him about the context and tell him and describe to him what they would look like. And then another group, about, I guess, 3 months after, their vibratory rate on the planet, I could feel was moving, more collective consciousness was coming up. And I said, I haven't sensed them very often anymore. He said, no, Antonia, they can't really come, the lesser ones, the negative ones, because our vibration is raising. They can work from off planet, but they can't come here anymore. I said, okay. And so I thought, fine. And sure enough, that night was beautiful. I've never seen had such a beautiful experience. I went to sleep, and it was in the winter there in California. It's still cold in the mountains. But what ended up happening was, in the dream, there were two beings, and I had seen one of them before in this trilogy of people, a little short with white, what I thought was a ponytail, was a double medulla. And she had worn a visor the first time I'd seen her. And she says, my name is BT. Would you like to help us? And I said, she said, well, take a look around. And I said, okay. She said, but you have to be back here at this time. And sure enough, when I came back, I said, yes, I'm willing to help. And she said, okay. They gave me put me in a little, what looked like a Howard Johnson small, tiny room with the weird colors, the blue and the orange or something from that. And I looked out the window and I could see the earth as I left, but it was a round sphere, all lit. And then I woke up sitting up in the bed. And I thought, okay, if you were really here, you got to prove it. I need proof. So I went to my window and I looked out, and there was lights, and they went like this: a light going in a circle, stop. It went in a circle again, stop. Then a tiny little triangular one left and went shooting out that way. I thought, okay. But the ones at the end were so nice, because then she brought her mate or her partner, and they weren't in clothing. But my friend had had a similar dream that same night, the first appearance of the little one, that she came. They didn't tell us who they were, but now she was in clothing, not in clothing. And she said, we're so sorry. The other ones came and bothered you. We want you to know you will always be protected. But this is the strangest thing, Jeff. He was smiling, tiny little smile there, looked like a little Michelin people. And I thought, wow, but she was so loving. It went through my body. I was inhaling it. It was surrounding me in the air, goosebumps. I never felt that kind of love. I thought, from both of them, they were just so happy that I could connect. And then I realized humans have a long way to go to get that kind of love. So we have to continue our progress. They're here to help us, or those that want to. But that was the most beautiful experience. I thought, okay, we'll continue to evolve. Thank you for helping us. But then, of course, I drew them just to make sure I would never forget this scene. But I've never felt such love and benevolence in my life. No judgment, just oozing through my body, coursing through me, around me, smelling it, inhaling it. It was amazing. So I'm very grateful.
Are you aware of what those plasma orb things that people see are? Because many of the people who do see them feel this love, kind of like what you're describing.
Sometimes the plasma being, the orbs are people that have passed on that are benevolent and love us and want to help. And other times it could be some of the ones that aren't so nice. So your sense that you feel when they're around is important. So all the little balls of orbs or plasma are not always benevolent. The ones that have passed on and they come to visit, they'll come in that orb-like shape. But others are so negative and they just want to cause mayhem or problems. The negativity is heavy duty, and we promise to use our light or our awareness to see the difference. So ultimately, we should have no fear, but if you have an energy that is toward the lighted path or benevolent, ultimately, how can I say it? You will be attracting to those. The other hardcore ones that tried to scare me, like the one that looked like the Sasquatch, kept looking for me, hair, and it was muscled and huge. And I thought, I'll be darned. There are benevolent beings that really want to see us grow. And they come and help us each time. Hence, after Egypt, the Sumerians, we talk about Inke and Enlil. Enlil didn't like the little humans, and Inke loved the little humans. So started to teach us again to get us back on track. So ultimately, they came from Planet X Nibiru. They always come in that 3,650-year cycle around the Earth. It's a perihelion cycle. So it's a different shape than we would normally see. Instead of an elliptical, it's a perihelion on an angle. Okay, so ultimately, but they come and they get their gold, and it helps their biosphere that they've ruined. But I love that Inge wanted to help the little humans. So it always happens.
I found it fascinating that you said we have our most lucid dreams right before we wake up, because after you said that, I put it all together that I'll have 3 or 4 dreams every night, but usually the ones that are kind of out there and like I may dream of aliens or who knows what are the last dream right before I wake up. Unfortunately, if I do wake up, I usually can't get back in the dream.
I try to teach people this all this time. What you're supposed to do is have a scratch pad right on the side of the bed. When they give you that detailed visual before you awaken, your feet can't hit the floor. You reach over and just put the main 4 points that you saw. Then when your feet hit the floor and go to the bathroom, you're going to forget. You're back into your body. You're conscious again. But when you look at that pad, it'll help you recall and retain exactly what they showed you. And they want you to take action on it. It's a dream to take some sort of action. And that's what we do. Oh, nice dream. That was really great. No, it's for us, for the benefit of many others. So my hope is that you'll find, and you notice, Jeff, you said it's not symbolic. It's like you were really in the presence or really there engaging or in that activity. So it's real, and they're trying to let you remember. But once your feet hit that floor, consciousness is back in the body. But every night, everyone leaves the body, their silver cord attached, and they go to classes where we're trained on the different levels of astral planes based on that person's class structures or needs. And then we get back in the body in the morning. That's why in the morning, sometimes you'll wake up and like shake, because that's your body your consciousness getting back into the body. Some people can't even walk around until that second cup of coffee in the morning. And that's because they got in backwards and they straighten themselves up after the coffee. But we leave to go home for training and classes every night anyway.
I also have a lot of fighting dreams where I'm fighting people and I'll wake up with my heart pounding, like as if I was really running through alleyways and stuff. And usually I think those are the first dreams of the night. Do you know anything about that? The
Yes.
first dream of the night?
Yes, what happens with those symbolic dreams of fighting? There could be a test. They're seeing how you're going to act with, people that are adverse to you. And B, it is a symbolic dream that you're going to have problems fighting with people about something in your life. So they're trying to see how you're going to handle it. And the dream state, like I said, you can become Bruce Lee in the dream. You can, fly over people with a flying kick and really fly. But some people don't realize and they get nervous or don't take an action that's to help them. But the dream is telling you usually what you have to watch out for the next few days or next week, so you'll be prepared. And so that's what those earlier dreams are for, the symbolic ones.
Do you have a website with a map of like what the earth is going to look like once all these changes happen?
Yes, I do. AntoniaLau.org, Antonia, Lau, Lau.org. And on there, they can click, I have a spiritual section as well as the world changes. They can click and see, but they can also go on browser and look up Gordon Michael Scallion's future map. There's one for North America and for the world. And it's the most closely related to what Casey describes in detail in the book that was done by his son, Earth Changes Update by Hugh Lynn Casey. So what I found was his accuracy was on point over 10,000 topics that affect us. So it was amazing. And that is a comprehensive look at what we can see happen. Casey said he will be reborn in 2158 AD on the new West Coast, which will be Nebraska. And
That's
scientists will remember the work.
Interesting, 2150. So that's going to be after all these changes have happened.
After.
Do you have a contact form on your website if people want to reach out and ask questions?
Yes, they're welcome to. They can write to info@antonialau.org. And also for the structures, they can go on habitusbuildingsystems.com to see the structures that the guide showed me that we're working to build to get out there to as many people as possible for safe communities. They float, they go underground, they can, how can I say, they last a couple of 100 years, but they can be put up with 3 unskilled people very quickly. But either way, Habitus, Habitus, building systems with an S.com or antonialau.org.
Antonia, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yes. This is the last time on earth it will ever be this messy, or how can I say it, horrible, that people have to live through. Casey saw ahead that we finally actually spiritualized the planet. We're the ones doing the heavy lifting right now. So it was so we could, he said it was never meant to be top-down control on this planet. It is this way because the bottom-ups, us, did nothing to stop it. And he saw that the time would come that the people would gather with this brotherhood of thought and compassion. And he saw we end up fine. So we'll have those vehicles, we'll have generations to come, but no longer, this will be a spiritualized planet, similar to Arcturus. Arcturus has 8 dimensions. We'll be going from 4 to 5. So some people will sense it already. We're 3-dimensional, but we're raising, but they're at 8. We've got a long way still to go. So we keep working in the highest way. And remember, the benevolent ones love us, and they're here to help if we ask as well.
Antonia, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It was wonderful. All the best.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.